guess it's still morning or good morning. I'm Portia Bailey Bernard. I am the Vice President of Vice President of Develop Indy. And Develop Indy oversees economic development for the city of Indianapolis. So all business retention, attraction, and expansion is all within my organization that is actually housed within the chamber. I've been in this role. I was appointed by Mayor Hogsett in November of last year, which at the time I was pregnant with my first child, Maxwell, and I ended up having Maxwell in January. So then I took some time off for work, 12 weeks, and returned back into my role in April. And I've been here ever since. I'm an attorney by trade. So prior to being with Develop Indy, I was actually in private practice. I started my career at Barnes and Thornburg in their government services practice group. And then I went to a smaller firm, Kirker, Gardis and Regis, before entering into this role. My background was, I was a public finance attorney, worked a lot on economic development projects, representing the city and other companies as well throughout the state, various cities, towns, and out-of-state companies. I think what else? From Indy, grew up in central Indiana, went to IU, Bloomington. I ran track down there, then came back to Indianapolis to go to law school. And I've been in the city since then. I'm married. I've been married to my partner now for 7 years. And we have a little girl named Maxwell, and she's 6 months old. So I'm really in the thick of things and just trying to figure out how to balance life and work and motherhood. It's pretty brand new to me. And I grew up, my mom stayed at home with us, mainly because my family, it just was most cost effective for her to stay at home. They couldn't afford for us to go to daycare or preschool or anything like that. So really didn't grow up with an example of seeing what a working mom looked like. So just leaned heavily on mentors and colleagues that I work with to see kind of how they maneuver it. But I'm pretty much saying there's no perfect way, and every day kind of presents new challenges. So that's a little bit about me.
That's great. Thank you. And we'll get started on the Q&A. So the first question is, can you discuss your work-life balance before and after having a child?
Yeah, so kind of just like the nature and reputation of law firms. I was at one of the biggest law firms here in Indiana, and it's just kind of go. It's a grind. Get in early, finish late, your billing hours. I felt like I had a pretty good work-life balance in terms of being able to spend time with my partner Nolan. We just had the ability to move quicker than I guess I'm just thinking now with how I have to plan everything out with a 6-month-old. We can't just leave like we used to. But it was definitely a grind. I definitely worked later, got up earlier, could work on the weekends and not think too much about it. And I would find time to spend with Nolan as well. But it's a lot different. And then too, just like the nature of my job at that time, being an associate, a younger associate at a law firm versus being in the position I am now, totally different dynamics and scope of work as well, where I was in that role as an associate, I was on call to the client and the partner that I was working with. So it didn't matter if it was the 4th of July at 8 p.m. This happened to me. If I got an email requesting that I work on something or send something over, it's the 4th of July. I'm with my family. It was just, okay, I'll get it over to you as soon as possible.
That's great. Thank you. And anybody who had just got on, if you have any questions for Portia, feel free at any time to pitch in and ask. So if no one has any questions, we'll move on to the next one. Can you articulate some of the boundaries you have set up as a new mother in the office and at home?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm honestly still working on setting those boundaries, I can start with at home because I think honestly, I just figured it out this week. One of my new boundaries. When I tell y'all I'm taking this day by day, I'm taking it day by day. I think for me, the prior week I'd been working really, really late after Max would go down for bedtime, and I just wasn't getting enough sleep in terms of just because she's 6 months old, so she gets up early anyways. I'm fortunate that she sleeps through the night. I just wasn't getting enough sleep, and I was trying to get as much done as possible when she was down, which it just wasn't healthy. I was cranky and just not, it wasn't great for my overall health in the morning. So now I've set a time where, okay, like, yes, if there's something I need to get done, I'm going to get it done, but I'm going to set this goal of I'm going to stop, put my work down, and give myself some time to decompress, because I go to work, I work all day, I go pick her up, and then I'm with her until bedtime. And I just need to take like if it's 20, 30 minutes just to decompress and take that time for myself to just breathe and think about nothing, even, whatever that looks like. It's different for everyone, but that's like one of my new boundaries. I would say one of the other boundaries too, and I think it's too just being able to, I'm in a leadership role, and I'm also just in a whole different space than being at a firm, is not overextending myself when I just know I don't have the capacity to do something. And it's just being okay with saying no when it's reasonable to say no. And I would always find myself, if I was asked to do something or go to an event, if I really didn't have the time, or if it was going to place an unnecessary burden on me, and there's somebody else on my team that could handle it or do it, being able to say, no, I'm not able to do that. And I know that's different for everyone, depending on where you are in life or in your career and your position, but that's something I've had to really work on, being able to say no, and just, and asking for help too, and delegating better out to my team to help cover some of that stuff that I'm not able to take part in. Oh, did I freeze? Tiffany, you're on mute. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, it like froze for a second. I was like afraid it was going to lock me out. I'm not sure. Are we on the next question, or?
I think so.
Anybody have any questions?
I actually have a question.
Yeah.
Let's get this back up. And thank you actually for just being vulnerable with us, and fellow IU alumni as well. So nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So I'm wondering, it's a very interesting dynamic. So with me and my husband, I noticed that, and I guess this is twofold. When I am approached by my employer to do extras, I say, kind of let me get back with you.
Mhm.
And so, as opposed to when a man is approached by his employers to say, hey, do something extras, they immediately say, yeah, no problem. Like, and not really. And so, I in my life, I feel like I'm being the one that has to kind of bend a little bit more and readjust schedules for our children and the household. And I worry that it may cost me opportunities as far as my male counterparts. They're probably like my husband. They'll say, yeah, sure, boss, I'll do it. No problem. Or I'm like, well, let me, see, and I'll get back with you. Do you have any advice, or have you been in a situation similar to that?
Yeah. I've noticed with Nolan, he will agree. Like, let's say it's like drinks or work trip, he'll say yes on the spot. And if I'm asked to do drinks or dinner, or hey, can you go out to wherever next week, very much
We'll
like,
call.
like, let me, or yeah, I'm like,
Yeah.
let me check. I got to get some stuff situated, like,
Mhm.
childcare, make sure the dog's taken care of, where he just is like, will come back and be like, oh yeah, I've got this trip next week. And it's just, okay. I mean, we're coming into this next week. He's going to Vegas for a work trip. I know, Vegas for a work trip. And my schedule is insane next week, where I've got council meetings in the evening. I've got early morning meetings. And now I've got to like figure it out, which I know women do this all the time. And props to
Mhm.
single moms that just like get it done. And I don't want to sound like I'm complaining, because I understand I have so much privilege having a partner to help me, an extra hands with family. But it was kind of one of those situations where, yes, I'm very thoughtful, and before I agree to do something and how it's going to impact not only my schedule, but his schedule.
Mhm.
And so honestly, it's just having a conversation. We've had to talk about it, where I kind of am saying, hey, when I have things come up, I take the time to have a conversation with you before I agree to do something. And I've noticed with you, you just kind of don't have to even think twice about the impact that you being out is going to have on my professional career and my things as well. But no, I've definitely dealt with it. We're figuring it out for sure.
Mhm.
I just think having that open conversation and communicating and reminding them is key. I think you just have to bring it up every time. And to the Nolan would say I was being naggy or complaining, but
Right.
I mean, it's gotta at some point resonate, because it's not fair, and you do miss out on stuff, because to your point, like your male counterparts, if that's how they operate in their household, right there on the spot, if your employer is like, hey, can you do this trip next week? And he's like, yeah. And you're like, well, I got a whole situation at home I gotta make sure is, but then it's gone, because so I mean, it'd be great if everybody could be more thoughtful in that. But I even think it's maybe worth having a conversation with your employer too, if you feel you're missing out on those opportunities, and just bring it to their attention.
Okay.
I've got like a team. I mean, my team is of 8 individuals, and I'm very much like, hey, if you have something going on, talk to me. That's just like how I like to operate. And this is my first time in a leadership role too. But like,
Okay.
I know this conversation's coming up, this question later, and how having a child has impacted the way I lead. But with I'm very thoughtful with my team in terms of what they have going on outside of their professional lives, because I know that at the end of the day, it's going to impact their work. One of my team members, it's her son's first week of kindergarten, and she's trying to figure out, and she's a single mom trying to figure out drop off and pick up and all of those, and getting in here. And I'm like, girl, just figure that out. This is new for all of you. Figure that out, and you'll be here. So,
And even for us seasoned people, the bus schedules here in the greater Indianapolis area, my son yesterday got on the bus, there were no seats. The bus was that overpacked. And so then I had to make a decision. Was I going to let him stand on the bus, which is not safe, and the COVID and everybody being jam packed, or if I was going to, have to start work later and drive him to work. So it's those little things to always play with the work-life balance. So thank you and congratulations on the new baby.
oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'm figuring it out. She was giving me the whole spiel on apparently like IPS starts at 9:05 and they get picked up at 3:30. I'm just trying to figure out who these parents are that are and guardians.
I have always had to and seek out schools that had some kind of on-site aftercare program, YMCA or some study group. I always had to do that. So maybe a helpful hint, because there's no way.
Yeah.
Before and after care, YMCA is a parent's best friend.
And see, these are all things I'm learning because my mom stayed at home, and I was just taken in and I was picked up,
Yeah.
like now I'm like, oh my gosh,
There's things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
So,
at that age, the daycares and how expensive they are. And are they
yes.
potty trained? And I'm like, if I pay that much, I hope my child is trilingual. They have to come out speaking 3 different languages.
Facts.
Well, thank you guys. And again, great advice. I will probably definitely, like you just said, it was really simple. Just sit down and say, hey, let's talk about this because we need to be on the same page. So thank you.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
your question. Does anybody else have any other questions before we get on to, I think I have a Q&A list of 10 questions, so that would be number 3, but does anybody else have any others? Okay, I'll ask. What new skills has motherhood taught you?
Whew, patience. Patience, for sure. That is whole lot of patience and being more flexible. I am a very type A person. And if I've got a plan for the day and a schedule and I want to get certain things done and be at places at a certain time, but I've learned very quickly with a baby that is not always the case because she will spit up, she will poop right when it's time to leave. And so it's just me being able to be flexible and readjust because what was it? Saturday, we were supposed to meet people out for brunch and we pull up and she had a whole blowout in her car seat. So we had to maneuver and make it work. Me knowing to wait last minute before I get dressed and honestly before she gets dressed, because I can't tell you how many times I'm about ready to put her in the car seat. I'm packing her up and she spits up all over my outfit. So that's been the biggest adjustment. And getting used to less sleep too is another thing because I'm very much a person that enjoys sleep. I love sleep, but I'm figuring it out.
Something that I forgot to mention to you earlier, because it was on Saturday, I was playing on my computer and Coburn Place says, we're having a service fair. Do you want to come to the service? Are you going to come to the service fair? She mentioned it.
Hey, Miss Thomas, I think your mic is on.
Yeah.
Miss Thomas, your mic is on.
That was in March, but you just reminded.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? It kind of leads into our next one, actually, which is how do you practice patience with yourself to not be perfect when you return to the office?
No, that's great. And I'm going to use breastfeeding as my example for this one because I had in my head, and I think this is just me being a lawyer too, and just everything I've done, I got to be a perfectionist. I've got to kill it. So when I had my daughter, it wasn't I was supposed to have a scheduled induction. Well, I went in for a doctor's appointment and my blood pressure was crazy high. And I ended up having to be checked in that day at the hospital because I had suffered from severe preeclampsia. And so nothing about my birth was how I envisioned it. I was in the hospital from Friday to Wednesday. I was passing out in between each push, throwing up. Like it was just bad. I had to get a blood transfusion. I lost a ton of blood. And then when it was time to breastfeed, the milk just wasn't there. And so I went through all the emotions with that. And I had in my head, like, that I was going to breastfeed her for a year and all of these things. So then I probably did the most to try to get the milk to come in. And eventually my milk came in. We had to supplement there for a minute. And we finally got the breastfeeding down. Like I worked hard with the lactation consultant to try to make that happen. Like I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. Well, I go back to work and pumping and just trying to keep up that supply was just, it was hard. And I was killing myself, like just mentally and emotionally to try to like just get the milk there and get my supply up, and it just wasn't coming back. And so I had to get to a point where realize like it was okay. Like everything was going to be fine. This wasn't exactly how it needed to be. Max will survive. Like I wasn't even breastfed. and I'm here and everything was fine. So it was just getting past that hurdle. I'm trying to even remember what exactly the question was. What was the question?
No, that's great. It was,
oh yeah, so being patient with myself. So that was a moment where I had to tell myself that it was give myself some grace. Like I've done everything I can. I've provided for her the best I can. But I have to just let this one go. And when I made that decision to fully switch to formula, I can't even tell you how that was the best decision I ever made in terms for my own mental sanity and my own health. And props to women that can like keep that going and doing it, but I just had to be okay and not care what everybody else thought. And I love my pediatrician, and she's like, girl, it is fine. Your child is fine. Everything is fine, but she needs a happy, healthy mama. And if you're over here exhausted, power pumping at night, trying to get your supply up, like you can't provide that for her. And honestly, like it's just taken so much of a burden off of me, throwing that powder in that bottle and shaking it up and keeping it moving. I'm like, oh, this is so easy. And like, even like my partner now, he can join in and like, and help with it too. It's not, at first it was very much like, I can't breastfeed. You're the one that's like breastfeeding. It's like, no, everybody can participate. So, that has been definitely a time where I had to just be patient with myself and say that it's okay. Cause I was kind of crazy with breastfeeding. That was a tough one, but I'm so happy now.
that's great. I feel like I don't have kids, but a lot of my friends who are new mothers, the whole breastfeeding debate and like breastfeeding in general, I feel like a lot of guilt comes with that. And that's kind of tied into the next question, which is a new mother. How do you battle or work with guilt returning to work?
So it's really interesting because when I first returned back to work, I was like kind of excited to come back, and I felt guilty in like my excitement to like get back to work. I mean, that 12 weeks was of being home, and like I know there's a privilege in me being able to have the ability to do that, but it was hard, and it was COVID, and it was in the middle of winter, and we were just weird and uncomfortable with people coming over and helping us. So it was just like Nolan and I was excited, and there was, it's not like I tried to go on walks, but it was freezing outside. It's not like I could even just get outside and get some sunlight and some vitamin D. So I kind of felt like I got cabin fever and felt very much kind of isolated and trapped, which a lot of people felt. I mean, at that time, especially with COVID and cold and flu season, it was just the two of us, and we were probably at that point about ready to like kill each other too. And then we've got this baby screaming too. So that was hard. Sorry, why am I forgetting? As a new, did you battle guilt returning to work? So I was excited to go back to work. Now I'm at this place where with work picking up, work like I do feel bad when I feel like I only see her for like 2 hours a day. So I get up early and I try to work out, but then my partner takes her to my mom's because she stays over there with her during the day. And then I end up like on some nights, like getting there at like maybe like 6 or 6:30, and then it's bedtime. And I feel really bad. Like, God, I've only spent like an hour or 2 hours with you. That's definitely a guilt that I've been kind of like battling with now. And then just because during COVID, there wasn't a ton of social events, and my job requires a lot of networking events, a lot of drinks, a lot of dinners, and people are starting to do that more. And so I'm finding myself in the evenings having to go to dinners and drinks. And then I'm like missing bedtime, which sucks. And then, but then if I like try to like get up with her in the morning, then I miss out on my time to like run or exercise, which is super important to me for my own, just like not just physical, but like mental health. And then if I don't work out, then I'm just in a bad mood the whole day. And then by the time I get to her, so it's all the guilt. It's all the guilt and trying to, oh, then there's the whole like husband thing too, and like find time for us to like be with one another and spend time with each other. So it's, yeah, there's guilt in returning into work and my friends and my family. I mean, all of it. It's like sometimes I feel like I'm being a really good employee, like I'm killing my job, like I'm doing great with my job, but then I'm an okay mom, an okay wife, probably like the worst friend ever because I haven't reached out to you in forever. And then I start thinking about like my grandmother and my sisters, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so caught up in myself. So yeah, I mean, it's tough. I don't have an answer for it. When I think about it, like now I'm like all stressed out. Like, when's the last time I talked to my grandma? Like, these are just, I don't know how, I don't think you can do it all. It's just giving it your best. That's all you can do. I mean, yeah.
You'll get it as time comes on and your kids get older, and then those 2 hours will be just enough for
Just
you
enough.
to do it. I have a teenager now. Hey.
Okay.
Okay. But yeah, I felt exactly the same way that you did. And you know, your family, they understand. Your friends, they understand, and everybody's there to support you. And the longer you do, you know, I'm have my Bluetooth on. I live with this, and I'm cooking dinner, and I'm calling my grandma, or I'm calling my best friend, or multitasking is
Yeah,
key.
no, yeah.
I'm doing my walks in the morning, talking to, you know, my mom or whoever.
Knocking it
I had
all
to
out at the
yes, always, always, always.
Oh,
I'm the electronic back lady.
I got a question here. Working from home, how do you separate or deal with the urge to work constantly? Since the computer is there in your home, that is a great question. I think so. The way we've set up here at the chamber is we are a hybrid model. So Mondays and Fridays, we work from home and we're in the office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Yeah, I think that goes back to like kind of the boundary things that I've had to set up in terms of just kind of treating at home the best I can to how I would if I was in the office, because it's very easy to just keep working through the night. So one thing that I haven't done, but Nolan, my husband, does is blocks off just like breaks, puts in like an ultimate stop time to help break that up and not work after a certain period in time, which I think works very well for him. But no, it's tough. I feel like if you calendar, if you can block off time and just say like, this is the end of my day and just put your computer down. Also too, depending on like what your setup is, if you're able to find like a dedicated workspace, I guess what I would suggest is if you can, if you're able to not work in your bed, don't work in your bed, but like, just don't work in your bed. And I know some people work in their bed. I work in my bed. Like I am very much, I've done it since law school. You could find me just like working in bed and outlining and reading in bed. And that just is not healthy. Just do not work in your bed.
Oh yeah, that's great advice. I always try to separate out like being in my room and then being in a separate space just from a mental standpoint too. So I think that's good advice. And you kind of touched on this, but the next question is on the flip side, what were you most looking forward to your first day back in the office?
So for me, because it was a new role, I started in November and left in January. So I felt like between November and January, I was still trying to understand my team, understand my role, meet people. But I was also too, just like, I mean, I was about to have my first baby. Like I was so excited and focused on that. So for me coming back to work, I was just excited to finally feel like I could just come in and there was no fear of me just going into labor. Like it was just, I could come in and I could just focus on work. That's what I was most excited about, to be able to really dive into my position and really get things going, and meet my coworkers. Cause I mean, I came in on my first day, got my computer, went home, and then everything was virtual. So that was, my situation was a little bit different than returning back from a job that I had been in for a few years. So there was like excitement with all of that too.
That's great. Does anybody have any questions so far?
I did have a question. Do you think that there are things that employers need to change about the workplace culture so that there is a better work-life balance? Do you think that the workplaces would benefit from regulations so that there isn't, sexism ingrained in the workplace that would cause these issues for working mothers or for women versus men?
Yeah, no, I think there definitely needs to be a shift in culture. And for me, I've been very fortunate and privileged to be in positions where I have had accommodations made. I mean, I have my own office where I could privately pump. But for those here, like on my team and at the chamber that don't, we do have like a nursing room for mothers to do that. But I think it's also too just kind of, I don't know. I think of like Simone Biles and her just kind of making that decision to put her mental health first, and her well-being first. I think it's just adjusting our mindset when we think about just like work in general. And it's very much like work is important. It's the most important thing. But I think it's almost being more empathetic in your question with like changing the culture to women and just how much of a shift and just everything they've gone through with the childbirth and having those children. I feel like that's just, nobody just talks about it. It's just very much like, okay, so it's had her baby and now she's back and let's just like jump into things. And that's just not healthy because there's been like this whole physical and emotional and mental ordeal that this woman has gone through. And I guess that's the biggest thing that surprised me with even having my first child was just the physical ish you just go through. Like nobody told me, like I feel like all my friends and everybody just kind of like lied to me. And I guess I was so shocked even when I was pushing, like, is this really, is this how this happens? Like, is this, like, I'm really holding my legs up and pushing and then the doctor's stitching me up and I'm like hobbling up. I'm like, oh, this is childbirth. And then these months go like 12 weeks and I'm back. And now I'm like, oh, y'all just want me to work? Like my whole life isn't turned upside down. So I think if we normalize, and there's a shift in normalizing with like employers talking about just like how traumatic of an ordeal this is and having more empathy towards women, because this is where I get that like, women are just badasses in general, because it's like they can have a whole baby and pop it out, show up to work the next day like nothing happened and just like make it work. And so I think we just need to normalize talking about how much of an ordeal it is and how all the emotions and the mental and the physical changes that goes with it all. And then it won't feel like you're being weak or vulnerable or not as of a committed employee. Like that just needs to change. And we just all need to come together and say like, hey, this is a lot. And I know women are amazing and they just like suck it up and come back to work and just deal with it. But it's okay to say like, hey, I'm not okay. I'm suffering from postpartum depression. I've had this like physical ordeal. I think that could help a lot, but it's very much just kind of like have a baby, take some time, come back. Now you're back at it. But that's just not real. But we do as women such an amazing job of making it look like that, just make it look easy. That's just, I mean, the men don't know. So until honestly the women step up and their wives and their daughters and their sisters and are like, hey, no, like there's much more to it than this. Let's really get down and talk about it. then I think you'll start to see the shift in culture, kind of with how our attitude is with women and having children. Because I'm going to be honest with you, like, I think it was like my first year as an associate, and one of the senior associates was going on maternity leave. And I said to her, and I'll never forget, and this was the dumbest comment I could have ever made. I'm like, oh my God, you're so lucky to get those 12 weeks off. That'll be so nice. But that's how I thought of it. Looking back, that was the 12 hardest weeks of my life. But at the time, I was like, oh my gosh, she gets 12 weeks off. She's so lucky. But that's an example of just, that's
Not
just
knowing.
wrong.
Yeah, she was doing nothing. She had 12 weeks of rest and relaxation.
I was an idiot. I was like, you're so lucky. No, 12 weeks was awful. Yeah. Yeah. So there definitely needs to be a push for a change. I agree. I think there should be regulations put in place. I mean, if I had it in my ideal world, everybody would have paid leave. And then even when you're, again, this is too, just like to my privilege and having like a white collar position, thinking about employees that are in warehouses and factories or waitresses and making those accommodations for all those individuals as well. I mean, I was pregnant during COVID, so we were working from home. I was on my couch, working on the computer, like just typing every day on my couch. I couldn't imagine being 7-8 months pregnant and having to serve people or be in a warehouse or be on my feeder all day. I definitely think about that, and I'm like, man, those women are amazing. And I hope that they're getting some type of accommodation, because I was very privileged during COVID to be in sweatpants on my couch working, and I don't take that for granted at all. And I the whole time I'm like, God, could you imagine like being in that type of position, being pregnant? And it's sad, and I think we do need to do something and ensure that those women are receiving the necessary accommodations, and that they deserve them as well.
That's great advice. Questions were really good. Tiffany, or that's me. I'm sorry. I'm Liz. I'm covering for Tiffany. So when the Tiffany thing popped up, I was like, wait, does Tiffany have questions? She's logged in as Patricia. So it's really confusing today. But so on to the next question, which is, what is your most significant piece of advice for parents who have any trepidation about returning to work?
I guess I would say, so like the breastfeeding thing, like I had all these expectations and what it was going to be like and what my day was going to be like and how I was going to have everything organized and get up at this certain time and work out at this certain time and get Max over to my mom at this time and FaceTime her, and I'm gonna have a pumping, like set up my schedule for pumping, and I've got my materials and I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna do, and just have grace on yourself. I would almost say like, just don't come in with any expectations, because you just don't know what it's gonna be like until you get into it. I remember being on Amazon, like thought it was so like funny and cute. Like, I'm gonna find a pumping sign to put on my door so people don't walk in. Like, girl, like it's just have grace on yourself. Be easy on yourself. You're figuring it out. I mean, even if it's your second, third, fourth child, like it's a whole nother dynamic. You're adding another kid. Like, just be easy on yourself. It's not perfect. I mean, I was really fortunate because one of my coworkers, she was on maternity leave at the same time, and we came back together, and it was her second child. So I like was asking her 1,000 questions and just talking to her, and we were going through some of the same keeping our supply up kind of like issues and stuff like that. So just, I mean, find other women if you can to talk through some of those issues or problems. For me, it's kind of sad with the breastfeeding. Like, I was kind of embarrassed to talk to other people. I just assumed But everybody, like as my friends, the people that I knew kind of were just like pumping gallons of milk each day and just like making it rain with the milk. And my pride got in the way. And finally I started talking to someone and they're like, oh my God, I was going through the same thing, or I'm not able to get it to you. And it just finding those people you can trust and be vulnerable with is huge too. Like someone you can just like have a conversation with and say like, hey, I'm struggling with this, or what's your advice? I think that's huge. And being able to bounce those ideas or feelings with somebody is so beneficial, because I've appreciated it so much. Like Max went through my daughter a 4-month sleep regression, and that was hard because we had all gotten used to sleeping through the night. And all of a sudden she was just like up every hour. And I'm like, what is this? I go and talk to Sarah and she's like, I'm going through the same thing. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I think it's just like putting your guard down and finding those people that you can be vulnerable with. Because I'm very much like tough exterior, keep my guard up, don't like to share too much. I don't want people to ever see me as weak. That's my biggest thing. But now I've started to see that's so silly. And like, it's okay to ask for help and you don't have to be strong all the time. I'm telling y'all, Simone Biles, like when she just did that, I was like, man, talk about being vulnerable and putting it out there and being like, y'all, I'm still the GOAT. I am the GOAT, but I'm just not here mentally. And like, I appreciate that on so many levels, and saying like, it's okay. You don't have to be on, you don't have to be strong all the time. Like sometimes you're just not there, and that's fine.
No, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because that's, I feel like, so important for even, I don't have kids. So like without kids, I'm like, that's still for someone with me. I'm like, that being vulnerable and having someone to talk to, I feel like it's so applicable for anyone.
Yeah, definitely. And that's like something I'm very much a very tight guarded, don't share a whole lot with people. I mean, I share a lot like about my family, but in terms of like weakness or areas where I'm struggling, I am just not that person to do that. And me making that decision to start doing that with people has helped a lot. Even like with Nolan, I'll share stuff, but I've never been one, like if I'm just going through stuff at work, like sometimes I just figure it out and like keep it moving. But even now with him, I'm just like talking some of that stuff through. Like I don't have to carry all that on me anymore, just on myself.
No, that's really great. And does anybody have any questions right now? And if you don't have any right now too, like once we're done with the Q&A, feel free to ask any questions as well. So the next one is, how can employers and employees change the culture around parental leave?
I think it's just having conversations. And I think it takes, for me, this being my first like leadership position, people in leadership just being able to like speak up and say something. I think that's where it starts. We just have to have open conversations. And I mean, people on my team and stuff probably think that I'm like, TMI was what I share, like in terms of like my birthing story. But I'm like, no, y'all need to know, like, sis went through it, like this was hard. And I've shared with them about my return to work. And I feel like a lot of times I had to catch myself. When I first came back to the office, we had like a Zoom call and people are like, how are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And it was like 2 or 3 weeks in, like, how's it feel to be back? And then I would give my generic, it's great. I'm happy to be back. Then finally, at one point, I was like, y'all, this is hard. Like, I'm happy to be back, but this is harder than what I expected it to be. And just saying it. And I think that helps a lot too. But again, that's like being vulnerable. And then I'm also in a position too in leadership where I feel comfortable saying something like that. And so I kind of feel like it's my obligation for those that work for me or are employed and not in a leadership role to say that for them and normalize that. I think that's huge, but we just got to talk about how it's not easy and not be so concerned about it sounding complainy or anything like that. But like 12 weeks is not enough time. 6 weeks is not enough time. I mean, it's just not. But it takes people to have those conversations and say stuff like that, especially in leadership. It's got to be said and brought up over and over as much as you get an opportunity to. And so I definitely feel like that I've got a seat at the table in that regard. Like, I'm just going to remind you guys all over and over and over again that that's not enough time. Make sure you're accommodating this individual, check in on her, all of that stuff, because it's really easy. And I just said, like, as women, just being badasses, just to like suck it up, just do it, don't complain, and just get it done. And that's just not healthy.
No, yeah, that's a great advice, even for, I don't have kids, but like just you being honest and open about this. My best friend's pregnant and she's like, I'm gonna give you the real down of what it's like to even be pregnant throughout all of it. And I was like, wait, what? It's not like just the generic that I've heard. So I think that's great, especially from a leadership position, to be able to share that with those around you as well. The next question is, has having a child made you look at childcare in the city of Indianapolis any differently?
Oh yeah, for sure. For me, I'm super fortunate. My mom watches Max every day. And I give her, like, I pay her to help with that, because like that baby all day, that's a lot. So I've been super fortunate in that regard, but my mom has made very clearly to me that once Maxwell turns 1 year old, she will no longer be watching Max every day. So right now I am in the hunt for childcare, and it's slim pickings. I live in Indianapolis. We actually live downtown, in north end of Mass Ave, like behind Livery. And so just trying to find something with the hours that work for us, that's at the qualifications that work for us. And it's like a whole second mortgage with the cost of it. So it's definitely had me kind of rethink. And what's cool in my role is, in terms of business attraction, we offer incentives to companies to come to Indianapolis. And what we've done, Develop Indy in the city of Indianapolis, is with our incentives, like an abatement, we'll offer a company. An abatement is essentially a reduction in property taxes that they'll pay on their land and their building. But we've basically required that the savings, 5% of the savings that we offer an abatement to, go towards employee training, childcare, or transit. So they've got the option to either do some type of training program, use that money, the award money, towards like training for their employees, whatever that looks like in the whatever area that company is in. Or one company we worked with recently, Greenleaf, they now provide, they use their award saving towards a stipend for each employee for childcare, which is amazing. And what we're encouraging a lot of employers that come to the city seeking some type of incentive to do. So yeah, it's definitely had me reevaluate and look at kind of the childcare options that look at within the city and the affordability of it all as well.
So does anybody have any questions? Because our next one is the last one. So if you have any questions now or after that one, feel free to ask. So the next question is, the last question is, what makes Indianapolis an ideal place to raise a family?
I think, and this is me coming from literally my whole job is to encourage employers and talent to come to the city. I think the one thing we've got going for us is definitely our cost of living. It's a very affordable city in comparison to a lot of other cities in our country. I think that's the one thing we really have going for us in terms of raising children here in the city. Now, I know we've got like all of our other challenges, and even the idea of affordability is subjective to each individual. But in terms of comparison to other cities, I do think that is one big win for us.
the culture, the Children's Museum,
The parks.
I'm already butcher it, the Idle Museum, what is it? The IMA changed their name. The zoo,
Newfield.
Newfields, yeah. So for me, I wanted, I wanted something exciting like New York, but safe. So I get the big city, little city hospitality feel for Indianapolis.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a great point. The parks, the trails, there's a lot to do, and there's a lot to do that doesn't require you to spend a whole lot of money, which is great as well. Because I used to nanny back in the day for some families. They had a lot of money and they could spend some money on the weekends on those kids. And I'm like, is this what having a child is? Got to keep them entertained like this. Very much you can go to Holiday Park and have a grand old time, or up on the cultural trail, Monon Trail. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of, and there's a lot of programming too through our parks, which is phenomenal as well, for everyone, which is great. Coming downtown, cultural trail, Monon Trail, Bottle Works. There's a lot of cool stuff going on in our city. That's family friendly. Concerts, White River State Park.
They have a lot of jazz in the park concerts during the summertime. I think we're down to our last 5 minutes. People are going back to lunch.
Does anybody else have any questions? Just in general, or? All right, well, I'll let the real Tiffany wrap this up. Thank you so much, Portia. Like, as a person who does not have kids, it was super applicable even just for me about work-life balance, about having patience and being vulnerable. But I know for people who do have kids, I mean, it was invaluable. The real Tiffany who's on is Patricia Coleman. She was texting me throughout. It was like, oh my God, everything she said is so applicable. So I'll hand it off to her to finish up.
Yeah, thank you, Liz, for jumping in and helping out. I know I had you on as a backup and you ended up being the lead on this one. Portia, thank you so much for getting on and answering these questions and doing this topic for us. I definitely think that this is a topic that's much needed to talk about. Our director of marketing, Shayla, who's on the call as well, she actually gave me the idea for this topic. She had twins last year during COVID and just trying to figure out that work-life balance. I just had my second one in January, and like you said, 12 weeks just is not enough time going back into work. Everything you were saying, I was like, oh my gosh, yes, like I can relate to this so much. And like Liz said, I think people who don't have kids, there's still that balance of, you still need to have that. You still need to have your person to talk to and bounce things off of. There's other things going on in your life, even if you don't have kids, that you still need someone for. Does anybody have any questions before we wrap this up?
No, I just thank Dress for Success to bring, things like this, especially during the lunch break. This is one of those things that help my work-life balance. It's not additional, something that I have to take time away from my kids. So being able to do this on my lunch break, I commend you. Appreciate you guys for bringing this forward. Thank you again, Portia, for being so vulnerable and sharing your successes and challenges with us. I appreciate it. Congratulations to Shayla, did you say, that just had twins? So thank you guys for coming together and doing this for us.
Yeah, thank you for that feedback. We try to get, lunchtime hour, and then we have another one at the end of the month. That's in the evening time for people who can't do lunchtime. I will send out an email to everyone who's on today, just giving you the link if you want to watch this recording or share it with anybody as well. And the link will take you to the other recordings for other workshops in the past as well. And then I'll share the upcoming workshops that we have. But I thank everybody for getting on, and have a good day.
Thanks, everyone.